Good morrow, my lovely little ghosts, and welcome to the Dark Orchard. I'm Laura, and this is a makeup video. As I said in my intro, this is a makeup video. More specifically, though, this video is not exactly a me doing my makeup video as the others are. This video is more geared towards a concept. Let me explain. So, there was a tweet from, I believe it was Chris Motionless on Twitter. It was either Chris Motionless or Motionless White. I don't remember which account it was, but I'm thinking it was Chris. And I said, new songs to hold us over, or an eyeshadow palette. Now, I've heard some buzz about a Motionless and White eyeshadow palette before, so it's not that big of a stretch. A few people seem to like that comment. And it got my brain to thinking. It got my creative brain to winding around. So then I took to my Photoshop and I started coming up with different concepts. But not just for Motionless and White. I came up with concepts for 4 different bands just because as I was coming up with them, I realized I wanted to do a video on it. So with that being said, I want to share with you my idea of like the perfect makeup palette for 4 specific bands. It's not a big leap to say that bands can't have their own makeup. For example, the Palais Royale palettes. And if you know this channel, you know I use this one a lot. And of course, there was the Andy Black liquid lipstick. And Black Veil Brides have also had their own war paint. So, it's not that huge of a stretch to say bands with makeup palettes. So with that being said, without further delay, let's get started. The first palette I came up with was for Falling in Reverse. As you can see, this is a Falling in Reverse inspired palette. I did a skull as the cover of the palette, like the front flap of the palette, because when they did the last tour, oh gosh, what was that tour called? When they did the last tour after Drugs came out, the tour where Christian Coma was the drummer, so they had shirts that had the date from the video on them, and then on the back there was a pink neon skull. I thought that pink neon skull was so awesome that I just had to add it to the palette concept. But it's not just about the cover of the palette, it's about what's inside. So let's pop back into that wide shot and I'll discuss the colors and the names I gave them. So starting in the upper corner, we have a glittery neon blue with the title Loser. Beside of that, we have Just Like You, which is a neon orange. And then beside of that, appropriately, the neon pink is named Popular. On the next row, we have a glittery neon green called Monster. On the opposite end, we have a regular neon green. This would be a matte, and it is called Fashionably Late. Underneath that is a hot pink called Bad Girls. In the center, a regular neon blue titled Game Over. And then an orange in the corner titled Vampire. In the center, we have 2033, which is the dark glittery black, sort of like a galaxy, as sort of like a representation of the time skips and all of that that go on in the new videos leading up to the 2033 thing. And then the white, the glittery white powder is titled Drugs. I would love this palette. I think these colors are so pretty and vibrant, and they really can be used for a lot of different things. Like, especially if you love glitters as much as I do, a palette that has both the base color and a glitter, perfection. I like so many options with just this one palette. It's fun, it's young, it's kitschy and poppy, and I really like it. For me, it represents like older Falling in Reverse songs, but also the newer era as well. It's just like that perfect mix, melding the entire discography together. And that's what I was going with when I designed this one. So the next band that I focused on are no strangers to having makeup being part of their allure. And that is Black Veil Brides. Black Veil Brides kind of made a name for themselves wearing makeup, wearing their war paint. And like I said previously, with Andy's solo career, we got the Andy Black liquid lipstick, And Black Veil Brides in the past have had a war paint pot. So as a serious Black Veil fan, I really put some thought into the colors that made the most sense for Black Veil. So let's take a look at that palette. Okay, this one I appropriately want to name the Legion palette because it would be just like the go-to palette for any Black Veil Brides fan. So the one thing that may draw your attention the most with this palette is the giant black circle in the middle. That would be a literal war paint. That would be like the Maybelline that all the guys used when they did their war paint. I'd love to see something like this size, but in black. Just smack dab in the middle because people still do the traditional war paint for Black Veil Brides, and I think it would be fantastic to have something with a similar formula to what they used for war paint smack dab in the middle of a shadow palette. So the war paint would specifically not be eyeshadow, but everything around it would be. I also added in 2 glitters because gold and silver both to me represent different eras of Black Veil. So let's go to the wide shot and look at the palette as a whole. Here you can see it a little better, the big giant war paint palette, and then different colors around it. So with silver, I've called it Legacy, and this would be just a pressed glitter pigment, kind of like the ColourPop pigments that I use sometimes. And then beneath that, Phantom, which is a scarlet red, sort of an homage to Scarlet Cross. Then the next is a pure white color, Lost It All, which would be great for adding little details or highlights. Next is a yellowish gold that I've called Perfect Weapon. It would also be a pressed glitter. The next eyeshadow would be a pressed pigment called Savior, more of a lavender color, sort of like an homage to Black Veil Brides 3, or potentially the new songs from The Night. And then, of course, Vengeance most definitely is an homage to The Night. Then we have the bright red that I've called Rebel. Now, of course, there are so many other colors that you could add to a Black Veil palette, but I think that is the most simplistic one that people would get the most use out of. And I like that it's round, it's compact. I liked that, and I liked the use of the newer symbol because we want new stuff. It's a change from all of the other typical logos. I like the new logo on the front, and then when you open it up, it has a little representation of their entire song catalog. I actually thought about just doing 5 different colors to represent the 5 different albums, but then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, these colors more represent the band and the color story that the band has gone through. So let's jump right into the next one. So now it's time to talk about the palette that started it all, the one that my brain thought of first, and then the idea just spread into what this video is now. And that would be the Motionless in White palette. I love this design. Absolutely love it. I love everything about it. This honestly might be one of my favorite, but I love all 4. So it's hard to pick a favorite, but this is one that I would use daily. Like if this was the only makeup palette that I had, I would want for no more. So there are no glitters in this palette. As I was thinking about Motionless in White and the color story that the band tells, my brain just kept going to neons, but also darker colors. It was just like a flip-flop between the two. Like, for example, to me, all these colors just make sense. So let's go to the wide shot and talk about the colors. You can kind of see me in the background. Yay! I'll try not to move much so that you're not distracted. For the Motionless in White palette, I was fully inspired by their gothic side, the gothic nature of it all. It just, to me, made sense because they used a casket in the Eternally Yours video, and I don't know, the coffin just kind of screamed Motionless in White to me. I liked the logo with the skeleton giving the middle finger. I think that logo is just really cool, and it worked really well trying to figure out the front of a makeup palette for Motionless in White. So let's talk about the colors. Of course, if you're going to do a one and done makeup palette, you're gonna need black and you're gonna need white. Those two colors are base colors for a lot of looks, especially a lot of concert looks. So we have Eternal, which is a deep, deep dark black. I'm kind of guessing sort of like the Palais Royale black. And then we have a ghostly white that I've appropriately named Immaculate. Of course, most of these are named after their songs, as were the others, but this palette specifically focuses on song lyrics or the songs. So above that, we have a hot pink that is Disguise, and then we have sort of a muted neon pink that I've named Loud, because the color's loud. So next we have a red orange. The red orange is called Voices, and then beside of it is a neon orange that I have named Undead. I thought about naming this one Pumpkin, but then I thought, no, Undead, like Undead Ahead, makes so much more sense. Then we have like an emeraldy green, like a bright emerald green, that I've called WTF. And then beside of it, of course, I had to throw a name in there that's Blah. Spelled like the lyric is spelled, BLEGH. And it is more of a neon lime green. At the very top, we have Reincarnate, which is a violet, like an ultraviolet color. And then beside of it is a lavender color that I named Creature. As I said before, this would be like a one and done palette. It would be one of those palettes that if you had it, you could do a ton of concert looks for a ton of different bands. But the fact that it would be Motionless in White inspired just gives me that extra bit of happy. I'm always on the search for neon colors and unique colors that I can incorporate into different looks, and I think a palette like this would really shine in that department because the colors aren't glittery per se, or they aren't shimmery, but they do have a bit of a pop to them. Like they would need to be very, very pigmented, like one swipe of your brush and you've got color deposit. That's what I'm imagining for this kind of palette. And to me, just looking at the coffin without looking at the Motionless in White part, it still screams Motionless in White to me. So I'm curious if you guys see the same inspiration that I saw. And now for our final palette. I could not leave my Photoshop without doing a Nice 9 Kills inspired palette. Again, I'd say this is one of my favorites, but I love all four of them, and all four of them are my favorites because every time I see them, I'm like, I want it. I want it to be real. I want it to be real. Let's take a look at the big view and we'll go over the colors and then we'll discuss it. So for this one, I had a little bit of fun. They can make palettes shaped in a lot of different ways, and I think a axe shaped palette would be super cool. Let's not talk about the handle right now. Let's just get to the palette because I want to talk about the handle when we're back off of the full screen. So the first color I have is a rusty red. I titled it Last Resort because it reminded me of the red maroon color that is in the carpet from The Shining. Beside of it, it looks kind of pink on here, but in my editing program it was a like really super bright red like Georgie's balloon, so I named it Georgie. Underneath that is Carrie, which of course is a blood red, because what would an Ice 9 Kills palette be without a blood red color? And then beside of it is an orangey red that I named Jack. Again, a Shining reference. In the center, we have a traditional deep black. In the center, we have a coal black. Not quite a deep black, but more of a coal color that I named Valentine for My Bloody Valentine. Underneath, we have a lighter gray titled Bruce, after the shark in Jaws. Beside that, an off-white. Not quite a sheer white, more like an off-white, like Michael Myers' mask. Drop down from Michael and we get Freddy. The green is like the color of Freddy's sweater, the green part that's the green and red. So you could easily do a Freddy look from this palette. Then pop on over, we've got another It reference with a yellowy color that I called Float. And then the last color is titled Reagan after The Exorcist because it looks like that sicky pea green. So I named it Reagan. So now let's talk about the handle. So the handle, of course, just makes it look more like an axe. But I was thinking, and I actually showed a friend and she thought the same thing. The friend was Broken Halo cosplay. But the handle could be functional. Just like a little carved indentation into the handle. And then have a makeup brush inside. And the makeup brush could even be themed towards Ice Nine Kills. And I was thinking something like this, because this is the kind of brush that I love to use for eyeshadow. Something very simple that could be put into that little space of the handle, and that way you could easily have a transportable palette that you could take anywhere you wanted, like a travel portal. A travel palette that already has your makeup brush in the palette, so you don't have to worry about that. Kind of like when you get a powder and the powder comes with a powder puff. Think that, but eyeshadow, and having your own brush with your palette. This would also be a one and done palette because it has your black, your white, it has all these different colors that you could play with and mix and match, do all sorts of things. The Bruce color could also be used for Jason if you mix it with Michael, and just so many different colors you could do. It's endless. You could do any look based on an Ice Nine Kills song that you could pretty much want to do. There wouldn't be much else you'd have to add to this to get a cohesive look. Some people do fantasy football. I did a fantasy palette. 4 of them, to be more specific. I'd love to do more of these if you actually found this video entertaining. I love to Photoshop things, and I love to create, and I love to concept, and this was just such a fun concept. I had to share it with you ghosts, so I really hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. I enjoyed the making process just as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. So would I love to see these palettes or similar ones go into production? Of course. I think it would be so fun to have band themed makeup palettes. And like I said, I use the black from the Palais Royale palette constantly. It's so deeply pigmented. The best black eyeshadow I've ever owned. So, you know, the expectations are high, but I think that it would be something doable. That being said, in case I didn't make it clear, these are just thoughts in my head. These are just photoshopped images. They're not in production. They're not going to be in production as far as I know. They're not going to be in production. I'd like for them to be, but they're not. There's no announcement saying that any of them are going to do this. It's just me having a bit of fun. Pin that as a disclaimer, but I enjoyed making the video and I enjoyed making the palettes in my Photoshop program. So for the comments down below, I want you to tell me which of the 4 were your favorites. So we have the Black Veil Brides, the Motionless in White, the Ice Nine Kills, and the Falling in Reverse. Tell me which one was your favorite. And if you don't talk to me about that, talk to me about something, because I love for you to talk to me down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you come around again soon. Say bye. Bye.